the Q&A, you just tell me where you're from, and I know that you're hearing me, and it looks like you are hearing me. I've got someone from West Palm Beach in Florida, which must mean it is incredibly early there. So good of you to join us. But you're actually someone in Texas, even earlier, I would have thought. Someone in Lebanon, Mumbai in India, Estonia, Finland, Madrid in Spain, Dubai, Oxford, Norway. Fantastic, brilliant. I absolutely love seeing all the locations that we have of people around the world, so that's fantastic. It sounds like you're hearing me loud and clear. It is 11 o'clock, or just gone 11 o'clock here in the UK. I am based in Cambridge in the UK, if you weren't aware of that. And today, this morning, we will be looking at a quick survival guide for new TOK teachers. And I hope to fill you with confidence and fill you with enthusiasm. If you are about to teach TOK for the first time, or if you have just started teaching TOK for the first time. I remember when I started doing it myself, and it was a little nerve-wracking. I didn't really know what I was doing, and I think that is the experience for a lot of teachers who begin this amazing course. Okay, so just a quick look at what we'll be going over today. I'll just very quickly introduce myself if you're not quite sure who I am. I'm then going to go through 10 tips and kind of mindsets for new TOK teachers. So frames of mind that I suggest you get into, and sort of practical steps and strategies that you can take in your classroom in order to make the TOK experience great from the very beginning of the course. I'm not going to read out each one because we'll go through each one. I will be sharing this with you, so you don't have to worry about sort of taking notes or anything like that. And obviously this is being recorded, and I will share the recording with you. So yeah, that's how we're going to do this. Okay, so this is for new TOK teachers. I do a lot of webinars, and I aim them at different people, sometimes students, sometimes even parents, sometimes non-TOK teachers, other DP teachers, sometimes experienced TOK teachers. The you in this webinar is really TOK teachers who have come to the subject for the first time, or maybe you've been teaching it for a few months, or maybe for a year. You still want a little bit more help with mastering the course. I am an incredibly selfish teacher, and my sort of acid test for whether or not I'm doing a good job is whether I'm enjoying myself. So I suppose the aim of this webinar is to help you enjoy yourself when you teach TOK, because it is the most enjoyable course I've ever taught in my life, and I'm very passionate about it. I love it. So I hope to sort of move you along in that kind of direction. We will take about an hour this morning, so through to midday for me in the UK, and a sort of civilized time for you if you're in Texas or somewhere in the USA. Hopefully you won't fall asleep during the webinar. Questions and messages, as I've just said, it seems like the chat is disabled for some reason, but the Q&A is functioning. So by all means, send me questions as we go along. I will try to check them as we're doing this discussion, and respond to them as they come in. I might leave them for the end if we have time, but I will be sending out a debrief email shortly after the event ends. Attendance certificates as well, we'll send you those so that you can say that you've been involved in this event. I will send you this presentation. Inevitably, there'll be one or two mistakes in the presentation. I always make one or two mistakes, so I will correct it. It will be a perfect version of this presentation, and you'll have a copy of the video recording of the webinar. So lots of goodies coming your way, obviously all for free for this particular webinar. I am Michael Dunn. If you haven't come across me before, I run the website theoryofknowledge.net, which I've been running for a frighteningly long time now. I think I set it up over 10 years ago when I was teaching in Peru. I tend to yo-yo between the UK and South America. I've taught in Colombia and in Peru. I've taught in 3 wonderful schools in Lima, the last of which was Newton College, where I was the TOK coordinator and the head of Form 6. So I've been teaching for a long time. I've been teaching the IB for a long time, since 2001, and I've been intimately involved in TOK for well over a decade, and now run the site full time, although do quite a lot of visits around the world and online with schools to help them kind of integrate TOK more than anything else, integrate TOK with the rest of not just the DP, but sometimes with A-levels, with GCSEs. I like to show people how they can spread the kind of mindset of TOK throughout the school, because I think it turns any school into a true, genuine hub of real-world critical thinking, as I will try and show you this morning as well. Okay, so that's me, that's what we're doing. Let's move swiftly into the tips that I have gathered to try and help you create a great course. I'm going to move my head periodically, it gets in the way of the text. Okay, so my first tip is this. TOK is a mandatory course that students don't choose, and there is a danger that they can think to themselves, you know, why are we being forced to do this course? I have chosen my other subjects. It doesn't give me many points. Why am I wasting my time on this? They may even be supported in that view by slightly more, how shall I put it, pushy parents who might think, you know, why are we doing this? This person wants to be a doctor, they want to do science. What is the point of TOK? So I think you have to head that off as quickly as you possibly can. And I have to say, I'm very ambitious for my TOK course. If I don't have students coming to me by the end of the course and saying to me, that was the most fantastic educational experience I've had in the DP, maybe even in my school in general, I'm disappointed. I want a few of them coming to me and saying, that was amazing, sir, that was incredible. I want them all to be able to say, I understand why we did it. I want them to be able to clearly identify the skills and the content that I've given to them. So we need to establish this early, why they are doing this course and why they shouldn't see themselves as sort of having to do it, being forced to do something that they don't really want to do. So tip number one is establish purpose. Why are we doing TOK? And I think there's a number of different ways that you can do that. Some of them are more kind of utopian. Some of them are more pragmatic. So I think we can get in with a combination of these. First of all, let's head off that myth that TOK is just 1.5 points or even less than 1.5 points. Obviously, as you know, it combines with the extended essay to give those 3 bonus points. And a lot of students will say, you know, it's just half of those bonus points, 1.5 points. Why am I wasting 100 hours or even more if you're me, because I try and cram in loads of hours? Why are we wasting so much time on this subject? Well, it's not 1.5 points, okay? TOK trains the students to think in a certain way. It helps them to become more critical about knowledge. It helps them to improve their understanding of their different subjects. So looking at it in that way, it can make the difference between a 6 and a 7 in every single subject. And this means that, you know, you could actually raise your whole sort of DP points, not just by the 1.5 points, but by 8 points across the sort of board of the DP, the spectrum. So, you know, we're looking, sorry, six points. So you can see it as almost 7.5 points instead of 1.5 points. And that's what I'm very, very clear with my students about. You know, embrace TOK, become a TOK thinker, and you will be able to apply that to your other courses within the IAs, within the final exams. So it is actually a fantastic opportunity to raise your points by a significant number. That for me is definitely not the most important thing about TOK, but you know, it's a good way of heading off what the students might sort of use as an easy criticism of the course. I think it develops the most crucial skills that students need right now. It helps them to navigate the virtual world, the real world, with a lot more confidence, with a lot more success. So it's really what business leaders are looking for, universities are looking for. It develops the kind of skills that our students need. It's in a way, it's the most modern of all of the subjects. If, like me, you fill it with real life situations, news events and issues that are going on right now in the world, then the students will see, how useful it is. They're applying these TOK skills to what's going on in the world. They're making sense of them. They're unpacking them. They're understanding them to a much more profound depth. They're going to realize, yeah, this is a useful, practical course. It's not a weird, esoteric, philosophical thing. It is a practical set of skills that we can apply to the real world. And again, I really emphasize that to my students, that they're doing something that's going to help them now, also to get into university, and also way beyond university, lifelong learners. I don't think that's truer than in TOK amongst any of the DP subjects. I mentioned universities. I really emphasize that with my students. Universities love TOK. They love the fact, excuse me, that students have developed these critical thinking skills. I mean, as I'll say in a minute, I hitch my TOK course to the 4 C's: communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking. Other schools, other educational programs, you leave them and maybe you've done that, but you haven't got tangible proof that you've done it. With the essay, with the exhibition, with the ideas that you've discussed in lessons, students can show hard evidence that they have developed these skills. And that just makes them so strong when it comes to applying to university. So universities absolutely love TOK. I've got loads of quotes that I give my students about the DP and about TOK, so I can really sort of sell that point to them. And most of our students are quite ambitious about moving on to a place of study for tertiary education, university, anywhere around the world, and they all love TOK, or most of them love TOK. So I think that's a really strong selling point as well. I also get buy-in by telling my students, this is as much about you making sense of your own lives, your own experiences, your own learning experiences and outside experiences, as it is about any other content. Because the beauty of TOK, of course, is that it's not a concrete curriculum that has an exam at the end of it. We can create this together, and that's what I sort of tell my students. You're going to help me. You're going to help me create a sort of profound experience here. So it's a sort of situation where if they want to make it boring, they can make it boring, and they can think to themselves, I don't want to be here. But on the other hand, if they embrace it, if you get them to do that, they will very quickly realize this is fantastic. I'm drawing on my own experiences. I'm making sense of my own life. And this is a wonderful lesson that I have every week. So I really managed to enfranchise my students, or aim to enfranchise my students. And that's, I think, quite a powerful persuasion technique for them. Okay, so establish purpose, tip number 1. Tip number 2, which is, all of these tips are quite closely aligned. They're all sort of interrelated. So tip number 2 for me, part of getting to that point where they know why they're doing this is knowing what they're doing. Okay, so I am very, very clear about my overall learning objective with TOK. And this is something that I've actually thought about, over quite a long period of time, and I've tried to sort of distill it and boil it down. What do I want my students to walk away with at the end of this course, at the end of this, hopefully wonderful 18 months or so that we are learning together. I've never been a sort of content-driven teacher, even as a history teacher, as a politics teacher, as a geography teacher. It was always more important to develop the skills. And obviously in TOK, you're able to do that more clearly than in any other subject, I think. So for me, the one thing I'm trying to get my students to do is be able to challenge their own biases and assumptions. Okay, I think critical thinking starts with a sort of examination of ourselves, understanding that we are flawed, that we are biased, that we have assumptions that are often very, very misleading. I think it's quite easy to spot other people's biases. I think it's quite easy to to know when someone has a kind of agenda. We sometimes need to do a little bit of work there, but it's, I think, a lot more difficult applying all of that to yourself. So that for me is where I'm trying to take them. So I'm trying to challenge their biases. I'm trying to challenge their assumptions. And I tell them that from very early on. And all of my lessons are designed about that. Now you can tell them that in TOK, we're not really trying to introduce them to huge amounts of new knowledge. I mean, sure, they come across new ideas and new thinkers, but these are normally just ways of rethinking what they already know. Your sort of raw material really is provided by the other DP subjects. It's provided by their experiences, what's going on in the news, their interaction with big events and issues, and you are helping them to rethink those things that they already kind of have possession of. You're going to give them new terms. You're going to give them a sort of lexicon of concepts to help them to do that. But you're not really, you're not reinventing the wheel, as it were. You're not giving them loads and loads of new content. So that's fixed in my mind, and it's fixed in my students' mind from quite an early sort of stage. And it's a fantastic way of designing your lessons, which I'll show you in a second. And if we can reach that point at the end of the course when they say, yeah, I understand that it's important to have humility about the knowledge that I possess, that is kind of the starting point for understanding and learning new ideas. So this for me is what it looks like. I keep needing to move my head. There we go. So my lessons are all designed in exactly the same way. I begin with an idea, with an issue, with an event, or maybe an experience that the students have themselves. I invite my students to offer their thoughts on that, their preconceptions, so we can try and identify their kind of assumptions and their biases. So I do that with my starter question. I don't know how many of you use starter questions. It was such a simple idea for me and a real revelation in my last school, where all teachers were required to begin their lessons with a starter question. So the starter question is a very approachable question. It's something that all students can give an opinion on to some level. And you come up with such brilliant starter questions that you don't even need to say anything. Your students come into the class, they see the starter question on the board, they sit down and start writing, and you don't say anything until they've actually got their ideas down. So that's how I start every lesson. We then discuss that those responses with each other, get them to talk in small groups, in table groups, share their ideas with me. We don't go too much into detail at that point, but then we start kind of probing, the kind of things that we've come up with. So we carry out some further investigation on the idea. This for me is always an article or a video or a podcast, some kind of really interesting, contemporary, up-to-date media source, related to one of the areas of knowledge or to the themes. And they carry out research, and I choose those very, very carefully to make sure that they are quite challenging and quite interesting and quite original sort of takes on the idea that we started with. Then we share findings. I try and support their ideas by making sure that they've taken sort of ownership of some of the concepts and ideas and terms within the media source that we're looking at to help them to structure their ideas. And that's when we have a really, really good conversation. That's when the kind of magic happens, when a lot of them are saying, wow, I never thought of it in that way, or I never looked at the world like that, or wow, you've just changed my whole perception of an issue or an event. Hopefully we're getting to that point. Obviously it doesn't happen every lesson, but if you're doing this each time you see your students, you are going to get to the point where you're changing lives. You really are. TOK for me has changed my life, and that's what I want to replicate for my students. And then in step 5, an exit question or an exit slip. So they don't leave the class until they've given me a response. The response is very closely aligned to the learning objective of the lesson. I personally like post-it notes, so I get them to write their answers on a post-it note, stick it to my wall. My classroom walls typically are just incredibly colorful, and you can't even see the sort of paintwork beneath all the things that I stick on the wall. I did see an article recently saying you shouldn't put lots of displays up. I think that's nonsense. I love displays on my wall. I love showcasing my students' work. They love it as well. So, you know, I love to see a busy, chaotic, confusing kind of display on the wall. I love that kind of thing, because I think that sort of reflects the nature of knowledge and the ideas that we kind of share and develop together. So I get them to do that, and this gives them the chance to revisit what they began with, and hopefully to reconsider what they started out with and change their mind about something, because that's what we're kind of aiming to do. So tip number 2, I mean, obviously, you know, you can have your own sort of aim, but this is my aim: to challenge the assumptions and the biases of my students. Okay, so very important here. As I have said, you know, TOK doesn't have a concrete curriculum, a curriculum that is examined at the end. You don't have to do certain things. I mean, obviously, we've got the sort of structure of TOK, so we have to give them something on history, we have to give them something on the arts, etc., etc. But they don't have to do something in order to answer exam questions. And this is incredibly brilliant for us. You know, it means that we can do what we want to some degree. It means that we can make our course interesting. You know, it's incredibly liberating for a teacher designing a TOK course. And here's kind of the dirty secret of TOK. It almost doesn't matter what you teach. You know, we do not need to give students an encyclopedic knowledge of each area of knowledge and theme. I remember seeing textbooks when I first started teaching TOK, and I remember at that point we had ways of knowing rather than the themes. And for example, for reason, these textbooks went into loads and loads of details about deductive methods of logic and just extraordinary, you know, detailed information about things like that, and you know, that was sort of carried over into all of the other areas of knowledge and the other aspects of the course. And I thought to myself, wow, do they really need this? And then at the end of the course, you'd see the prescribed titles, the essay titles, and think, they really didn't need that. They really didn't need that content. Why on earth have I had this textbook giving me all this information? You do not need that. You know, and to put that into the context of the exhibition, there's no mention of making links to the course. I know it is recommended that they write their commentary, their exhibition commentary, within the context of a theme, but that is really more for them to keep their ideas sort of focused and obviously align it to the course as it is. But you're not going to be marked on that. You're not going to be marked on how well you know language or how well you know technology. It just isn't a requirement. So you are under no obligation to go into loads and loads of details of about 5 areas of knowledge, the 2 optional themes and 1 core theme. So for goodness sake, make your course as interesting, as engaging as possible. For me, as I say, I'm a very selfish teacher, so that means making it very interesting for me. But it's not entirely selfish, because when you're inspired, when you're passionate, then your students will be as well, and they'll pick up on your enthusiasm for what you're doing. And you know, in the context of the essay as well, they will only choose 2 areas of knowledge to set their essays in. You don't need loads and loads of detail about all 5 areas of knowledge. So, you know, don't worry too much about not covering certain things. They end up, in any case, doing their own research, which you will encourage. You know, so if, for example, they decide to write their essay on maths and I don't know, the human sciences, and you feel that you haven't covered that in too much detail, you can encourage them to go and do their own research, go and talk to maths teachers, go and talk to politics teachers, go and talk to psychology teachers, whatever it is, and they will help them. I should also say, I mean, this webinar, I don't want to be too much of a salesman, but obviously I'm the creator of theoryofknowledge.net. So on the site, on theoryofknowledge.net, if you are a member, you will find huge numbers of resources that you can use. I mean, I can show you the link here very quickly, just to show you the members section. So for example, you know, in real world resources, We have a bunch of things like the newsletter. We've got Investigating Issues, which looks at about 150 major global issues and gives you loads and loads of sort of media sources on that. We've got Knowledge Heroes looking at 100 different amazing thinkers, inspirational thinkers. And then we've got all our sort of ready-made courses. We've got 3 ready-made courses that you can run. We've got mini lessons. So there's loads and loads of stuff on the site that you can use to make your course interesting rather than sort of detailed and in depth with unnecessary superfluous information. Okay, so actually I've got that comes in 2 versions, engagement over depth. I would say this as well. To make your lessons engaging, I have to admit that when I was a teacher a long time ago, I qualified in 1999, which just seems to me impossible that it could have been that long ago, but there we are. It was 1999. As a sort of first-time teacher, I wasn't teaching TOK then, I was teaching other things. I would often use the door handle method of planning. I don't know whether you've heard of that, but basically it means you're opening the door to the classroom and you're going in, and that's the point where you start planning your lesson. It's not a good idea. Okay, I did actually find that out quite quickly. And as a TOK teacher, more than any other subject, I think you have to be incredibly well prepped for your lessons. And for me, I found that massively reduced my stress on a Sunday evening, because I wasn't thinking, oh my goodness, what am I going to do tomorrow? What am I going to do on Tuesday? I had it all planned. I had it all ready. And I was looking forward to teaching my lessons because I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And that's not to say you can't ditch your plan and go with something else. Maybe something's happened on that day. Maybe a student brings in a brilliant idea. But you have the option. If you have planned, if you've got a great lesson ready, you can sort of much more easily say, right, well, we'll ditch that. We'll do it tomorrow. Tell me about what's just happened to you. And again, just to sort of just to plug the site. If you want an entire course of classroom ready lessons, they are on the site for members, so you can use our lessons, and I'll show you an example of 1 or 2 of the lessons that we have in a second. So tip number 4, be planned. It will save you so much stress and it will help you to engage your students. Tip 5, I've kind of mentioned this already when I've talked about designing the course, but this is very much their course as much as yours. And as an educator, as a person interested in ideas, I have loved hearing my students' ideas, because they always give you a different perspective. They always give you an idea that you hadn't thought of. So it's fantastic hearing their take on the things that you show them. I want to hear not just their opinions. I want to hear their experiences. I want to hear, how they're progressing in their extended essay, what's going on in their other subjects, how they're sort of trying to think critically about the source of knowledge and the use of knowledge in all of these different subjects. And that's what sort of gives the course its relevance and the point of actually doing it. So the students have got to be involved as much as you possibly can, and make that explicit to them. You guys are helping me design this course. You guys are as much a part of it as I am. So make sure that they're on board with you. Okay, so this is very, very close to my heart. And as a first-time teacher of TOK, it's understandable. You've probably got the textbooks open. You're probably using them a lot. So my advice here may be kind of slightly scary, but I really don't think you should be afraid to ditch the textbooks. There are a lot of good textbooks out there. When they are written, they're fantastic, and I know people that write textbooks. But for me, the whole point of TOK is that you don't need a textbook. As a learner myself, I remember at school, the one thing that kind of removed your enthusiasm for a subject was getting a massive textbook. Here you go, this is what we're learning. And you think, okay, really? I was excited about learning about Tudor England. I was excited about learning about the evolution of Russia, but now you've just given me this enormous textbook, and suddenly I'm turned off. And I think the same thing can happen in TOK. You give them the textbook. This is the course. This is what we're doing. but it isn't. You know, that book doesn't represent knowledge. It doesn't represent learning. And the problem is, as soon as it's published, it's out of date, because your learning and TOK should be happening in the real world, today's real world, this week's real world, the last month's real world. And it's much harder to do with a textbook, I think. And some people say, well, yeah, okay, so you know, you can look at articles, you can look at the news, you can discuss experiences, but you can also have the textbook. I don't think you can. I would go with one or the other. I don't think that's a false dilemma. I really encourage you to think about ditching the textbook and setting your learning in the real world, and not giving them the security blanket of a textbook. If they really want, they can go off and find their own textbook. They're quite easily available, but I encourage my students not to do that. So, you know, I actually see this as a pedagogical aim to not use textbooks. It makes my lessons much more interesting. It makes my course a lot more interesting. It means that TOK learning happens in the real world, today's real world, and it just keeps it fresh. It keeps it engaging. It keeps it interesting. How can you do that? Well, I produce a TOK newsletter every month. If you're not aware, we have a free version if you're not a member of the site. If you are a member of the site, then you will receive it. It comes in a free version. It comes in a version for individual users, and it comes as a version for faculty members of the site. The one you really want is the faculty membership, because that gives you access to the mini lessons. So every month, I'm gathering stories. So I choose 20 stories for the newsletter. 15 of those I turn into mini lessons that can be delivered by TOK teachers and by non-TOK teachers. And 5 of them I just sort of offer as kind of just quick links with a few questions to unpack them. And all my lessons are the same. You know, every lesson has to be have a real world setting. It has to have something that's going on in the world. So all of my students realize all of the time, you know, this is real. This is a real subject. It's a practical subject. It's a subject that we can actually use. So that's tip number 6. Let me give you a few examples. I mean, I'm aware that time is actually going very, very quickly, but I will show you a few of the lessons that I produce. So this is from August's newsletter. I thought this was a really nice little video from Big Think. The physicist Francis Collins talks about the relationship of science and religion, and really tells us that it doesn't have to clash, which I find interesting. In case you're worried about that, I mean, he represents both perspectives. He is a scientist, but he also has a religious faith. And he was also best friends with Christopher Hitchens. And if you know who that is, you'll understand why that makes him such an interesting person. So there's a little kind of overview of what we do with that. So, you know, this comes as part of the newsletter. I give them a starter question. So this is the assumption that I will be challenging. I think a lot of students will say, yeah, there is a clash, because we're used to hearing that. And then I give them the video, a few little questions to focus on as they watch the video. The video is very short. It's like 4 or 5 minutes. Those are the kind of limits, I think, of students' sort of attention span. And then, you know, that's a nice challenging question at the end of it. You know, do we need to incorporate a scientific view and a religious view? This would lead on to some interesting discussions, I think. This is another story from August. This is all about smartphones improving, not damaging our memories, because we keep hearing that is happening. So the overview, again, I think the assumption here will be, you know, maybe reluctantly given, but the students will say, yeah, I guess smartphones are affecting our brains, because lots of people are saying that they are. And then offer them the article, which actually shows that there isn't really that much evidence either way. And if anything, you know, this study indicates that our memories can actually be improved by using smartphones. So it's a great kind of challenging idea that I think the students will appreciate, because they'll go home and say to their parents, oh, I should be using my smartphone more, or in school, the same thing. So yeah, I like stirring up trouble. And this sort of focuses on digital dementia, and that's what the article is sort of trying to debunk. But that sounds really kind of catchy, doesn't it? Digital dementia. Obviously, it's real because it's catchy and it's alliterative, so it must be true. And I think that's part of the reason why people have sort of bought into that without really having much evidence. So that's another mini lesson. This one was about the shocking event of Salman Rushdie being stabbed. Now, in TOK, we are not trying to sort of develop normative judgments. We're not really interested in first order kind of right or wrong when it comes to ethics, which makes it quite a safe place for students to discuss things. But we are interested in the process that leads up to judgments about morality and values. So I actually had to work quite hard to find an article that would support that, and I came up with one that was talking about the interpretation of art and who should do it. So those are all the details that they get, and it leads us to this question: who should be interpreting art and literature, and what problems can be caused when it's interpreted in the wrong way? And clearly, this is a very good example of art being interpreted in a deliberately sort of warped way, and most people making comments on the satanic verses have never read it. They don't even know what it's about, but it's evil and terrible and should be burned. So maybe we actually need to read something and have the evidence to be able to come to those kind of judgments, and we can think a little bit more about who should be doing that. This is a full-length lesson. Again, I'll show you how it sort of sets its learning in the real world. So this comes from our new course called Disruptive Ideas, which is 56 lessons, each one focusing on an idea that will challenge students. But it just gives a good idea of how I think learning should be set in the real world. So you've got a little bit of information there about the lesson and how it is a kind of disruptive idea. We're talking here about flat earth and anti-vaccination beliefs, obviously quite topical to the sort of period of time that we are hopefully now coming out of. What's very important for me is to make sure that my students don't judge others and they actually have a nuanced view of people who might have radically different views that they might even think of as being quite stupid. I don't want them to use that kind of terminology. I want them to understand why someone has a radically different view to them. So I talk about nuance. I think it's a really important term for them to use. We're going to link this to the TOK essay. Then there's a lovely video there from The Guardian about flat earth, and it really looks at the life stories of the people who have this view, and it's quite moving actually about some of their stories. Then we look at the anti-vaxxers via an article featuring Jennifer Reich. We look at quarantine protesters, people that didn't want to wear masks and things and didn't want to quarantine. So this is very much in the real world. We relate it also to the exhibition prompts, and then we arrive at our exit question. So I think that sort of demonstrates in a nutshell the use of TOK, trying to turn our students into nuanced thinkers, trying to make them understand other points of view, get out of their own sort of paradigms and sometimes quite dogmatic sort of views of the world, and really think about other perspectives. And then there's as with all of the lessons, there are a few links there for them to explore a little bit further. So, that just gives you an idea of how I do my lessons and how I set them in the real world. Okay, back to our tips, because it looks like we've only got 20 minutes or so left. So we're up to tip number 7. So this is more, as I've said at the beginning, more of a kind of mindset thing rather than a tip, but it's incredibly important to remember that you are part of a team. Okay, I've been quite lucky in the schools that I've taught in, because senior management have actually been TOK teachers, and they've been really, really proactive about encouraging TOK, giving me kind of resources to develop TOK, and giving me more than anything else time to do TOK. So that I know is not the case in all schools, but you need to have that mindset that you've got to have support from SMT. You've got to have the right timetable for TOK. It can't be squeezed into small lessons. It's got to be done by everyone. Everyone's got to be involved in it, and you've got to get quite sort of bolshy about talking to your SMT if they're not giving the right amount of time, if they're not encouraging a culture of critical thinking and TOK in your school. Everyone is a TOK teacher. And I don't just say that as a thing that they have to do according to the IB. I think it's something that everyone has to do if they're offering a proper education. Everyone should be encouraging real-world critical thinking, which is what we do in TOK, both for the benefit of their own subject and also just to create the kind of students that we want to come out of our schools and be able to navigate the world and become successful and apply to university and all the other things. So we're all TOK teachers, and that's something that all schools that do the DP really need to have deep in their DNA. So the more you share, I mean, how do you bring this about if it might not exist in your school? The more you share what you do with your faculty, with the other teachers, the more I think you'll be able to bring this about. When I first began teaching at a DP school, I wasn't a TOK teacher. I had no idea what TOK was. I never saw a TOK lesson. I didn't know what was in the TOK curriculum. I barely knew who the TOK teacher was. So you've got to make yourself visible. You've got to get everyone involved. And again, this is how we can help you. This is how the website can help you. You can share the newsletter. I have presentations and emails designed to send out when you begin every new unit of TOK, so all the teachers know what you're doing and they can all play a part. I invite teachers into my class. I strong arm teachers to come and teach a particular kind of lesson on an area of knowledge or a theme if they have more expertise than me, which they normally do, especially when it comes to things like maths and the sciences. I'm more kind of humanities based. So get them involved, make yourself visible, put up displays, get your students talking to the other teachers, and just remind your team or remind the other members of staff that they are part of the TOK team with you and they should be helping what you do for their benefit as much as for yours, because it just makes for great lessons. So you can offer them those mini lessons that I've just shown you, and they can just plug it in and they don't have to do any work in order to teach them TOK and support what you're doing. I also produce a little, well, actually it's not little at all, it's a very large resource called the Diploma Program Integration Tool. So again, this is something that members have access to. You'll find it on the site there. I'll move my head again so you can see. So it's all in the members area here. So this is the DP integration tool. So I'll show you a sample of this. So if we go into group, let's say group 3. So we go in here, and you'll see for every single subject, even business management, even digital society, which are quite new, there is a presentation which gives all teachers access to what we do. So this is the one for history. So they get one of these, just gives them a little introduction to TOK if they need a bit of help. Some quotes on knowledge with some links to the people that offered those quotes, some big knowledge questions that could be discussed in their subject. And then there's loads and loads of media sources, videos, documentaries, mostly articles for them to read, and a little bit of information there about how they can use them. And then at the end, there are some links to some mini lessons that they can use to teach some great lessons in their class. I've also got some links there and some unpacking instructions for TED Talks that obviously are great for us in TOK, but also bridge the gap between what we do and what the other subjects are. So there is something there for all teachers, whatever their subject, so you can use that if you're a member of the site. Okay, let's move on. You are part of a team, always remember that. Talking more about the students, I would say be very, very careful about overloading them. They are doing something which is very, very difficult. I mean, I did A-levels in the UK. They're doing the DP. I think it's much more difficult. I think it's much more demanding. It's a stressful time of life when they're doing the DP, 17, 18. They're trying to get into university, which has never been more difficult. So, you know, life is pretty tough for them. And you've always got to remember that. I was head of Form 6 when I was in my last school, and I saw it every morning with them coming in tired because they'd been working on essays and IAs all night. And yeah, it's a very stressful time. So I do not want to add to their burden. And also it makes TOK boring if you set too much homework. So I tend to just give them non-written homeworks. So I get them to watch the news, gather media sources or stories, bring in their own experiences, and that's pretty much it. I might give them one written assignment every term to help prepare them for the 2 assessment tasks, but I go easy on them, and I keep them on my side by not giving them too much homework. I also highly recommend not going overboard with the assessments. Don't sort of give them loads and loads of information on the exhibition and the essay early on. Drip feed it. Okay, so what you need to do is identify the skills that are going to be assessed in the exhibition, the skills that are going to be assessed in the essay, and gradually introduce small assessments to help develop those skills. So I've done that on the site. Again, members have access to resources that will help do this, but I've got some nice sort of diagrams here to show you. These are the essay skills that I've identified from the rubric. So there are 5 different skills I would identify, and on the right hand side you can see, you know, that's what we're aiming for, that's what we're trying to do. So for me to build up skills for the TOK essay, I really just do 2 sort of preparatory assessments. So I make them write a TOK journal at the very beginning of the course to give them the idea of how to look at different perspectives and how to make links to TOK. I get them to then write an essay plan, which adds skills of relevance to the title and the quality of the arguments, and then they work on their final essay. And remember, you're going to work very hard one-on-one with them when it comes to the final essay. You're going to be doing those 3 interactions. So even if you feel that you haven't prepared them that brilliantly in the class, you're going to work with each one individually, and you're going to be able to give them individual help, and that's where all the work will really happen. So don't worry too much about, you know, giving loads and loads of support on the TOK essay. You know, obviously give a bit, but don't go overboard. And the same rule for me applies with the TOK exhibition. So with the TOK exhibition, I think there are 4 different skills that they are assessing. That's what we're trying to do with each one of them. And then for me, the TOK exhibition, I give them 2 practice exhibitions. The first one is quite a short one, just 250 words, and just sort of looking at one object. The second one is slightly longer, looking at a couple of objects, and then the final one becomes a little bit more. Well, it's the real thing. So 950 words and obviously 3 objects. So that's how I do the assessments. We do it gradually. We build it into our course. And hopefully that will make it slightly less painful. Okay, so this final tip is kind of related to the team one. So I mean, I hope it doesn't come across as arrogant, but I really do think that TOK is the most special part of the DP. It's what makes the DP unique. It's what makes it so highly regarded more than anything else by universities, by potential employers. It's what makes it so wonderful. And so it's at the center of what we're doing. It's at the center of what everyone's doing. It's at the center of, you know, the culmination almost of your learning experiences in school. So I really do think it's the most important thing that students do. And maybe I'm misguided there, but I don't care. You know, that's what I keep in my head, that I am doing the most important job. And it does sort of rankle a little bit when you see jobs advertising for history teacher in brackets, and TOK would be useful as well. You know, that annoys me. I think schools should be going for TOK specialists, people that have experience in TOK. I think more and more they are, and that's actually what attracted me to the schools that I've taught in. They were very serious about TOK. So it is important. I think it's the most important thing that we do. It's not a fringe subject. It shouldn't be seen as something unwelcome. I hope, you know, you're not unhappy about doing it. I hope you haven't been forced to do it. It can be brilliant. It really can. It can be the most fun that you have with your students, for you and for them. And you can just turn it into a wonderful experience that students will always remember. And as I say, I don't think it is just sort of a part of the DP, it's part of an education in general, and that's what makes it such a wonderful thing. Okay, so that's tip number 10. TOK is central to the DP. You should always keep that in mind. Be proud of what you're doing. Be a bit arrogant if you want, because I think what you're doing is wonderful. And I hope that your school sort of sees it in that way. Okay, so just a couple more slides to show you a few other things. I'm not going to follow the links here because we are running out of time. There's a lot of free stuff. So if you're watching this and you're not a member and you don't want to become a member, and, you know, to hell with you, you know, there's free stuff that you can use and take away. You can subscribe to the monthly newsletter. There are 3 mini lessons that come with the free newsletter every month. So you can use that if you want. So there's a link to the last edition there. I've produced quite a few videos. I mean, this will become a video on the YouTube channel. There are some little animated guides to the essay, to the exhibition, and there's quite a lot of guidance notes that you'll find there on the exhibition and the essay. There's loads of notes as well. You might have seen already on the site, so you can follow the links here to see. Got loads and loads of notes on the core theme, the optional themes, the areas of knowledge, all sort of divided up. So you get loads and loads of quotes. I like quotes as a way of sort of beginning an exploration of something. Then there's some real life situations you can use, some media sources, some knowledge questions, and there are some links to key thinkers. Okay, so there's quite a lot of free stuff there. If you want some members resources for free, you can download them on the sample members resource page. So follow that link to take you there, and you can get some of the lessons that I've developed, the kind of thing that I've shown you during this presentation. If you want to join us though, you'll be very, very welcome. There is now a ridiculous amount of stuff on the site. I've had to reorganize it because it was getting out of control. I think it's under control again. But you've got 3 possible lesson ready courses. Okay, so you've got the big question course, which you can run as it is. You've got the classic course, which looks directly at areas of knowledge and optional themes and the core theme. And you've got the one that I just showed you, which is the disruptive ideas, which actually is my sort of preference these days. I think the disruptive ideas course works really, really well. You can obviously pick and choose. You don't have to run all of the classes. You can edit the classes. You can do what you like with them, but they are there if you want to have your entire TOK course ready to run. Just plug it in and play it, and it's there. But I do recommend obviously looking at things before you do it, just to make sure it's going to work for you and it's tackling the right things. I mentioned and I've shown you some of the mini lessons. So these are designed to run 10 or 15 minutes. You can use those as an alternative to any of our other lesson presentations, but I'm thinking really with other DP teachers in mind. So, you know, share them with the rest of your team, get them teaching TOK, get them enjoying TOK, because it's quite a big ask saying, you know, you've got to teach some TOK. Well, I know nothing about TOK. Well, here you go. Here's a ready-made lesson. You can use that. It will bridge your subject and TOK, and it will be great for your students. They'll love it. So, you know, I'm trying to help you to integrate what you're doing with the rest of the course, because I think that actually helps in so many ways to make your life easier. There's loads and loads of real world, what I call real world resources. So there's a TOK newsletter, which is kind of central to what we do, and it makes what we do updated every single month. So what we find within the TOK newsletter, we feed into all of the other resources. So everything is always being updated. It's always new. I showed you very quickly the investigating issues, which looks at loads and loads of big issues going on in the world. It gives you some media sources and unpacking suggestions. Knowledge heroes as well. The TOK world resources, so that's in a slightly different section of the members area. I showed you the diploma program integration tool. We've got something else there called the 12 key concepts, which looks at all of the 12 concepts and just gives you some help in unpacking them, bringing them into your subject, linking them to the course. You've got media sources, you've got links to quotes, you've got lots and lots of material there to use the 12 key concepts. And you can also download some really nice classroom displays, because I think the 12 key concepts should be up on your wall. I think they should be everywhere in your school, actually, because it just makes it easier for students to articulate and frame their discussions and ideas. There's also an exhibition prompt decoder, which helps students to get to grips with the 35 IA prompts for the exhibition. And then I'm trying to spread things down the school a little bit, maybe in a slightly sinister way, taking over the world with TOK. But there's now a middle years newsletter, so you can use that with your younger students to help prepare them for TOK when they come to do it in DP1. And there's a couple of courses, one of which is Thinking for Yourself, which is 12 lessons plus an introduction and a conclusion that looks at critical thinking, real world critical thinking, gives them a lot of the ideas and terms that they will come across in TOK. So, you know, we shouldn't be teaching TOK before DP1, and I think that's totally right. But we can certainly give them some of the language, some of the ideas, some of the thinkers that they will come across, so it's less strange for them when they come to do it. So that's another quite popular resource of ours. Finally, I would say this as well. Another way in which we help schools is I love to come and visit schools. I love to set up online workshops. We're getting quite busy, which I'm really happy about. Recently, I've visited quite a few schools here in the UK. I've been up to Lancashire, if you have any idea where that is in the UK, to an amazing school called Stonyhurst. I visited a school nearby called Gresham's. I've been down to London quite a few times for schools in there. So I love to visit schools. I've done a lot of workshop visits all over the place. But if you don't want me to come to your school, we can set something up online. And I've done a lot of online sessions. And if you follow the link there, that will take you to the workshop page, and you can see all the places that I've visited and hopefully helped in getting TOK to become a brilliant experience. The main thing I like doing is helping non-TOK teachers see that TOK is wonderful, and showing them that it doesn't have to be an onerous task. They can do it with lots of the resources from the site, and normally I'm quite successful in getting them to become excited about TOK. Right, perfectly timed, I would say. It is now 11:58 here in the UK, so we're just about out of time. Final page there is just a Q&A with my email on it. Please email me questions. I might hang around for 5 minutes or so now, but I don't want to sort of take up your time. I can see that one or two questions have come in. Right, so someone has said, can we get the PowerPoint? That's an easy question. Absolutely. I will be sending this out to everyone shortly after this ends. It might not be today, it might be tomorrow, but I will get it to you. Someone has just said, I've just joined theoryofknowledge.net. I have the individual access, but the amount of materials is intimidating. I get lost and can't decide what to use and what not to use. Hard to narrow things down. Email me and I'll help you. We do that kind of thing. But yeah, it's really your decision what you choose. But you know, I would start with a course. So pick a course and then share the newsletter with the rest of your faculty. And that's a good way of kind of starting off. But yes, I know there's a lot of stuff there, but you've got to make some decisions about what will work for you, what you like doing. But I can give you some advice via email, so you can email me. Any other questions? I don't mind being here for a few minutes. Anything I've said which was confusing or weird or just very hard to understand, I'm happy to clarify anything. If not, I will be sending out a debrief with responses to some of the questions that I might get via email, and you can certainly send me more questions via my email address there. But yeah, just a last minute to give you a chance. We've still got quite a few people in the session. Oh, hang on, we've got some other questions here. Do you have a list of starter questions related to each area of knowledge and or the optional themes you could share? I have a tough time getting my students to think in the second order. Yes, I agree. Second order knowledge questioning and thinking is more difficult. Any tips for getting them to transcend to that level in their discussions and writings? Well, yes, I do, Chris. I've got lots of tips and lots of lots of materials that would help you. You know, it's all on the site. I don't know whether you're a member offhand. There are some free materials that give a few suggestions, but if you really want help with that, then you'll find it in the members area. Again, I'm more than happy to respond by email to members' queries. So, you know, if you want to send me that question by email, and I will send you in the right direction. We've got a couple more questions here. Okay. Okay. Someone's asking, can we use the TOK exhibition exemplar from IBO for reference? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, use that as a way of giving your students some idea. Although I have heard it said, I would never say it myself. I have heard it said, but they're not that brilliant. And I have to say, I have had slight trouble reconciling the marks offered for some of those exemplars. I think they really need to update them, because I think they put them on before we really got going with the exhibition. But yeah, by all means, use them as a rough reference point. Yeah, just be slightly wary that I hope that they'll be updating them quite soon, because what happens normally is when a new assessment is introduced, it kind of almost takes on a life of its own, and we start understanding it in a different way. So I think we might have shifted our sort of interpretation of some of the points on the rubric. So I think that's what has happened, really. So hopefully they will be updating them. But yeah, use them, but with that sort of advice. Any other questions? No, lots of people telling me where they live, which is nice. In one of the webinars, they mentioned it's very old. I think you might be referring to the exemplars, which, yeah, I agree with. I think they need to update them. Someone is saying, I have several other preps and classes that are not IB. I am at a new school and the only TOK teacher, blah, 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 blah. Sorry, I won't read out the whole thing. So the question is, what's the ideal situation for TOK teacher that I might be able to make happen next year? Yeah, you're saying maybe this is an offline question. I'll be very happy to answer that if you send me an email. That is quite a big question, but that's fine. Yeah, I'm happy to support people by email. This is kind of part of what you can expect with membership as well, because I like hearing questions, because it makes me start thinking about how I do things. So I actually really like I like these kind of questions, but that one is a big one. So email me and I'll give you some thoughts. Someone is asking, any advice on building a TOK team of teachers besides sending the newsletter? Yeah, I mean, I've got quite a lot of ideas, and actually there are 1 or 2 webinars that I've done. If you have a look at our YouTube channel, I've done webinars on this very subject, and I think they're free. I mean, yes, there's lots of things you can do. Invite teachers into your class, write to parents, which is a really good way of impressing parents, I've found, and then they sort of feed back to other teachers, and the other teachers say, oh, that's pretty cool what you're doing there. We might start doing that, and then they pay more attention to what you're doing. Loads of displays. You might think of doing a conference. If you're really thinking big, you might think of just doing a smaller event with TOK. Make the most of the exhibition and turn it into a big public event. So I think there's quite a lot of ways that you can get the other teachers involved. Something else that I started doing in my last school, which I didn't quite finish doing, but we had what we call TOK champions, and it was a person who wasn't the head of department, but they were in each department, and they were kind of my point of contact in each department. So I would go to them and say, this is what we're now doing for the next month or 2. Can you share that with your other teachers? And somehow it's better coming from, say you're dealing with maths, it's somehow better coming from a maths teacher to other maths teachers rather than from the TOK teacher to all of the maths teachers. And it made communication slightly better. You can talk to the heads of department as well on what you're doing. But yeah, be as open as possible, be as public as possible. The newsletter will help a lot. Displays will help a lot. force your students into other classes and get them to ask really awkward questions about knowledge. That's a good way of raising your profile. So yeah, there's a lot of things you can do, and have a look for that webinar. If you can't find it, you can write to me and I'll try and point you in the right direction. I don't think there are any other questions for now. Oh, what do you propose for a new TOK teacher to start with? Yeah, so I have traditionally started by actually teaching TOK for the UK year 11. So that's sort of final GCSE year or final MYP year. And we have a few little lessons to kind of break the ice. And I sort of start, I get them to watch The Matrix, which is frighteningly old now as well, but it's still brilliant. I still love it. And I think it's a really nice film for them to watch maybe over the summer holidays before they come back. And then you ask for their reactions about, the blue pill or the red pill. And that's one of my first lessons, to think about whether they are curious about the world, regardless of the consequences, because sometimes asking questions and finding out the truth can be quite uncomfortable, and it's better off to stick your head in the sand. And I get them thinking about that. That's the first thing that I start with, and then we move swiftly from that into what I said in this webinar, which is making them understand why TOK is brilliant, why it's necessary, why it's important, why it's good for them to do it, and that's the way we go. One of my other early lessons, which obviously is available as one of the PowerPoints on in the membership, is all about Bo Lotto and his visual illusions, and it gets them to the point where they realize that we all construct our own form of our own version of reality, and it's quite a shock for them. And it's probably the biggest assumption buster that I actually do with my students, and it really makes them rethink everything. And then they think, if I was wrong about that, well, I might be wrong about everything. And it's really good, because you can then build on that, and you can show them some very cool things. So that's one of my very early lessons that we look at, and I sort of link that to knowledge and the knower. We look at memory as well quite early on in the course, and show them how unreliable memory is and how false memories can be implanted in our brains. So it's that kind of cool stuff at the very beginning that is linked to the course, but maybe not as closely as you might be thinking. But that's what gets them going. That's what gets them interested. That's what gets them excited. And once they're in that state, you can do a lot of really cool things with them. Any other questions? I think we've got a few other questions. Should both forms of assessment be introduced and applied during DP year 1? Okay, so the way this should happen is you should get the exhibition done in year 1. So obviously you have to introduce it in year 1 as well. Practice it, do it, get it done by the end of year 1. One sort of slight scope for maneuverability: you could get them to produce it, but not actually present it. You could present it at the beginning of DP2 if you wanted to space it out, but you should definitely get most, if not all, of the work done in DP1. For the essay, it definitely has to be introduced. So I introduce it quite early on with the journal, but I don't go into too much detail about it. But then you are writing it at the beginning of DP2. It has to be DP2 because that's when the prescribed titles come out. And I don't do much teaching apart from that in DP2. So I get almost all of my teaching done by the end of year 1. A little bit in the first few weeks of DP2, and then it's essay time. And I try and finish the course quite a long time before the rest of the DP. You've got to do that anyway to upload the essay. And then they can spend time in TOK lessons doing other things, doing their IAs, preparing for exams, etc., and that helps to sort of de-stress them as well. Okay, so as I say, any questions, you can send them my way. I hope that gives some idea about one or two things that you were keen to know. Oh, hang on, one last question here. Budget question here. I'm part of a non-fee paying IB program with less than 15 teachers and perhaps 50 DP students. We would really benefit from the faculty materials. Write to me. I mean, it's difficult for us because there's a lot of schools out there with a lot of money, and there's a lot of schools out there with not very much money. And we do actually work very hard to produce our stuff, and I spend frighteningly large amount of my time writing newsletters and things like that. So there's a team now. This is why our prices have gone up. We now have a team to help make support better. We've massively increased the resources. We have we've moved the site from one place to another, so it performs a lot better and hopefully is easier to use. So there is a reason for the price increase that we've introduced. But I am keen for all teachers and schools to have access to it. So write to us, and we can talk about that. Right, no other questions, I think. So many thanks for joining us. If you're watching this live, I really appreciate it, particularly if it's early in the morning for you. If you're watching this as a recorded version, you are also welcome to write to me with any questions. Yeah, get in touch about membership details, get in touch with how to use just the free version of the site if you want. I am quite easily contactable. Have a little bit of patience at some points of the year and at some times of the week, but I will get back to you as quickly as I possibly can, or one of the team will get back to you as quickly as we can. So many thanks for being a part of this. This was a really enjoyable discussion for me, and I hope it gave you some tangible things that you can apply in the classroom. So thank you very much.